good cops, there are bad cops. There's good authority, there's bad authority, and the wisdom is to know the difference, man.
Wait. I got to make an announcement here. Some people were saying they couldn't see us. And then I think it was Dan. Yeah, Dan said, I hope he hit the live button. I didn't hit the
Ah,
live button. I just now hit the live button. And I was I was wondering why Manny kept wanting to leave, and I thought maybe from getting off subject or something like that. I apologize, everyone. I apologize. Could you guys hear us? You could hear us, but you couldn't see us. Is that the thing?
hey, everybody, welcome to. Oh, wait a minute. We're on Royce's house.
Oh my God.
I forgot where I was there for a second, Royce. Sorry.
Okay.
Even I disappeared for a second there. I'm like, okay, we're good.
I know. Well, that's you and me, Bruce. Yeah, that's us, sneaking off into the green room.
Well, you know what?
Well, you know what? I'm just glad it wasn't our fault that people are getting restless as far as the conversation and all that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think so far the conversation's been great.
We just went through 35 minutes of not
history,
not being visible. Yeah, and of history. Yeah.
But were people hearing the broadcast?
Yes, Gloria.
Oh, good.
Again. Gloria, hi again to you too. Oh man.
Hello, everyone.
I kept seeing man of many faces saying things like, "Well,
hey, Dan,
I'm going to leave," and
Caitlin.
There's no way to recover from this,
Impossible, Caitlin. Impossible. You know me better, girl.
So anyway, what do we do? Restart the show or just no?
Well, why don't you just do a real quick abbreviated recap, just the highlights, and we'll take it from there.
Recap, in the 50s, Greenwich Village became, it was the beat movement. It was the beatniks, and they were listening to jazz and all kinds of things, and that sort of gave way to the folk scene, which also started in the 50s with what was it? Arlo Guthrie. Yeah, Arlo Guthrie.
Mm-hmm.
And later, Bob Dylan and so many of the people that wound up leaving, they got impatient and they left to go to Laurel Canyon. And so they went to Laurel Canyon. They got impatient. It was taking too long to be noticed. Finally, Bob Dylan got a breakthrough. 2 of his songs became top 10 hits with Peter, Paul, and Mary. They had the same managers. Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul, and Mary, they had the same managers. And so, Bob Dylan, let them use his songs, sold them the songs or whatever, got his piece. And it was 2 top 10 hits. And that kind of opened things up in Greenwich Village, and people were coming down there looking for artists that might be commercially marketable, so they could make money on them. It just created a whole new scene, and it continued to grow. And over time, we had all these venues were built, cafes, coffee houses, little concert places, and the whole town. They said every nook and cranny had room for a folk singer and a guitar, in the entire Greenwich Village, And so
Rita Coolidge said that no guitarist ever had a guitar case. If you saw a guitar case, you knew that guitarist was from Juilliard.
Yeah.
Juilliard's the music school.
The music school, Juilliard. Yeah.
She said nobody had. They'd have them strapped over. And can you imagine the Martins getting beat up on that? Oh.
I just want to say thank you to Man of Many Voices, who's back on now.
Man of.
It's like, look who's live. I don't know what happened. I played that little demo to start the show off, and I didn't realize that I hadn't hit the live button.
Happens.
But you know what, Royce? I've done the premiere thing a couple of times now, and my viewers tend to like that because they like to get there 5 minutes early. Even if it's not a live thing, it's just something I shot, and then I figure through my analytics what's the best time to release it, and that often is when I'm asleep. you know. So I've tried that a couple of times, and I got the idea from you, you know, because you did it first a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks or a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And I love the idea, so I stole it from you, brother.
No worries. Well,
Yeah.
Dan's telling me there was no audio or video for that.
Oh,
so people were just talking to one another in the chat. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Manny. I only have one face, Royce, but hundreds of voices.
well, guys, what you missed was basically Bruce Cologne dominating the conversation as usual. All right. Not
So
me.
you missed nothing, basically.
Bruce, you are so damn polite. Nobody's going to believe me.
Right. Oh man, I tell you what, this is a bit of embarrassment, you know. So we better like step it up here for the rest of the show.
All right, it's cool, man.
No,
Let's just take it from here. Yeah.
Okay, let me do a Bob Dylan.
We were starting to hit into that era that was known as the Greenwich Village Renaissance, which I think is so key,
right?
Because it's going to have so many implications for even not just that scene, but what rock evolved into throughout all the 60s and beyond, and even the singer-songwriter scene in the 70s and much beyond, you know, as far as just the singer-songwriter model, and also the social consciousness aspect.
Right. Royce, let's take it from there. That's a great spot because we had just about reached there.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
it's the happening scene right now.
The first thing I have to do is repeat my Bob Dylan impersonation. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? Okay.
Royce, that was every bit as good as the first one.
Maybe even better.
I tried to extend it to make up.
Maybe even better.
Maybe even better. Good. Okay, so man, we have all these.
See, this is why I love being on this show. Just the energy here, you know, the camaraderie,
banter.
You know,
yeah, the banter, man.
I have, you know, we had a lot to say, and I don't know. Maybe I should pull up a few notes and repeat a little bit more than, or we can take it like you said, Michael. Take it from here.
Yeah. Well, Bruce brought that up. One of the bubbles that was starting to happen that Bruce was mentioning was the big three. I just watched several of theirs. Of course, Mama Cass was in the big three. They were quite popular. But listen to, look them up on YouTube, guys in the gallery doing the singing. The two males are great. The lead singer there on the one I saw was a fine voice, but she opens up her mouth, and you know what? She was in the wrong group, and they were good. It changes
everything, isn't that something?
Yeah, that woman, even that early on, you're just in awe of that. How did she? Who was the famous Broadway singer? She even did
something, I don't know.
No, she was no shit business like show business. Sure. Ethel Merman.
Okay,
she you know, when you hear Ethel Merman sing, whether you like her style or not, you go, what a freaking powerful voice. That's what Mama Cass came. And this is one of the bubbles starting to raise to the top that Bruce is talking about.
Right. Well, so like I was mentioning earlier, my head was a little bit cloudy after realizing we'd gone through so much time without voice or audio. It was like I'm just now getting over the shock. So originally, you know, Greenwich Village in the 50s was like the beatnik capital of the world. Okay, and you know, and the poets and Truman Capote was there, Allen Ginsberg. The big beatniks would be influential on influencing the folk artists, because the folk artists came in the 60s. You had Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, the Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary. They played the coffee houses throughout the area. And like I said, at that point, every nook and cranny could accommodate a guitar player with this acoustic guitar. And okay, so became part of the 60s hippie culture, which we're all familiar with. It included the Love and Spoonful, Simon and Garfunkel, Phil Oakes, and James Taylor. It was a cheap place to live. Many of the buildings were like 100 years old already, and many of them in ill repair. So perfect place for artists and musicians to flock to. And the place was pretty run down. Rents were super cheap. Old businesses still were there, like Italian restaurants. There was a big Italian community. And they brought cafes with the food from their home countries, cappuccinos, and like I said, the rents, the cheap rents drew in artists, poets, musicians, and actors. Actors are always looking for I know my older brother was trying to be a movie actor. He joined all the unions and stuff, and he played in a couple of movies. But he would, whenever he was down in LA trying to pursue his acting career, he would feel as though he couldn't leave the phone, okay? Because they're going to call him, and because he's kind of still a nobody. If he doesn't answer, they're going to call the next guy on their list, and he's out.
Which they would have.
And so he always was really struggling because, he needed a Greenwich Village as a place to live doing that, because both times he moved down there, his wife he had a wife that went to work and tried to help support. So anyway, that whole thing didn't work out too well. But anyway, so again.
But you know what? Also, Royce, we mentioned this too, the drug of choice being coffee. And but one thing I didn't mention when I was mentioning that before is think about, England, for the most part in Western society, created the coffee house. And some of the greatest astronomers in history, and some of the greatest theorists, the greatest scientists in histories, have always gathered in such places. Coffee being a stimulant, and other milder drugs being used to unlock mental processes. So Greenwich Village was a fire ready to happen. All the elements were there, brother.
And it's and you know what too, it's not just the cheap rent also that we mentioned as well, but it was a burgeoning community of people like looking for an alternative lifestyle outside the mainstream and what was considered the norm and stuff. So you have that sort of element fermenting as well.
That's good point, Bruce. Yeah.
And I want to go back to one other earlier point. The 50s was a decade that encouraged, rewarded, and at times downright mandated conformity, and it was kind of a gray flannel pastel decade. Even though a folk music revival had been in full swing when the 50s started, it was held in check, if not squashed, by McCarthyism, the big red channel scares. Many folk singers found themselves unable to perform. But within that suppression sprang the desire to break out. The children of the 50s, like I mentioned earlier, us baby boomers, grew up to reject those restrictive notions. Folk music provided a voice, a ringing sound of freedom. The 60s gave a second wave of the folk revival, and a decade that was loud and in full color, was how we said that. The stage was early set when Dylan blew into town. His timing was impeccable. The audiences were there, the venues were there, the infrastructure, the cafes, the shops, the folk center, the folklore center, the music, fans, everything was in place. It was built.
Dylan embraced an almost destiny. We also talked about how he had spent years on the circus circuit, and he was nothing more than the rest of them, a cover artist. And then him and, again, I'm going to forget his name, Bruce, Phil Oakes, broke out of the pack, because all these people were doing were just old Appalachian country songs modified to the new thought process. They might even add extra lyrics here. Lord, I've heard so many versions of House of the Rising Sun. And I love all of them. I love that song. And there was a truth coming out. There was a truth coming out, and Dylan embraced his writing. And I think why he succeeded where Oakes didn't was he embraced the analogy. He embraced using a fictional setting to make a
Right.
real point. That's why his music lives today. That's why they'll be listening to him with the Beatles in 100, 200 years.
No, they absolutely will. Dylan, was impressive, quickly developing his persona, a smart repertoire, but certainly there were others before him with talent that inspired him.
Well, he was an avatar, Royce. He was an avatar. He became something greater than he was even yesterday. The man would change daily,
Right. Well, like I said, they were playing in these clubs and these little venues, and they were trying to figure out what people liked and what to even say between their songs, say to the crowds. They were just learning how to be performers.
Right.
And, like I said, there was no connection between Greenwich Village and the pop charts until 1963, when two of Bob Dylan's songs, as performed by Peter, Paul, and Mary, recorded by Peter, Paul, and Mary, they had the same managers, hit the top 10. And that's when people started showing up in Greenwich Village looking for people that were commercially marketable,
Right.
A lot of the people had, like I said before, also, when no one was hearing us or seeing us, a lot of the people got tired of trying to, get something going. And they took off to LA and moved into Laurel Canyon and created that whole music scene.
Yeah, like Roger McGuinn.
Mamas and Papas, members of the Byrds, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Brown. It was just amazing. And of course, the
and its northern cousin in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury. Now think of all three of these happening places.
Oh my
what
God.
do they all have in common? They were all very short-lived because they
very short.
Creativity is a fire, Royce. It's a fire. It consumes itself. And you must almost destroy yourself to create. And those three are the perfect examples of the time periods of the 60s and what it cost us,
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was an amazing time. I mean, it was the generation that really changed the world forever.
Yeah.
Or at least the United States,
Yeah.
And
you know what I'd like to do, Royce, is I'd like to do a thing on the Haight-Ashbury with you and Dan, hopefully, and Bruce, just like we're doing tonight in the future.
Right.
Because that was just as powerful. And boy, we could do it because we've already done Laurel Canyon. Now we're doing this. We could wrap it up, man, so well.
Well, 100,000 people migrated in '67 to the San Francisco area, specifically the Haight-Ashbury area.
Right. Exactly.
And I remember I was a couple of years too young to drive and stuff like that when that was happening. So I couldn't just jump in my car and race up there to see what was going on, because we would have too. We would have piled in our cars. I mean, after
that was my backyard, so I could get older guys to take me.
Yeah, no, I know. Me and my.
So I was only 60 miles away.
Right.
So I lived in the city, and man, the smell of leather and psychedelic paint on every building.
Right.
And the sea salt, the salt in the air, salt in the air, and Born to Be Wild, playing out of every window, it seemed like, and Sergeant Pepper at every party. Right. Oh, you guys missed it if you weren't there, man. What a trip.
Me and my friends were so bummed we missed Woodstock that forever after that,
me too.
hear about a new concert that was going to take place that was more like a Woodstock, right? And one day
I didn't think it was going to be that big, so I didn't,
Right.
And afterwards, I'm like,
One day, exactly. Well, one day somebody said, "Oh my God, you hear about that festival they're going to have in Laguna Beach?" Well, that's only a 4-hour ride, And no, what's going on? Well, they're saying it's going to be the next, Woodstock, And so, oh my God, we piled in my buddy's what we call a Pink Panther. It was a lowrider painted pink with the front end up high, and you could barely get over a driveway to get in, right? And we all had long hair. We had little granny glasses on. We're all low riding with our arms out the windows. We go flying down the Laguna Beach, and we get there wanting to know where this is at. And they go, people are telling us, "Oh, you missed it. It was last week."
Oh.
So we pulled.
But you have a tale, Royce. You have a story. You know.
But you know what, though, guys? Everybody that came was still there. You know. And we pulled into the Taco Bell in Laguna Beach, and I'm not exaggerating. You'd have to see there to even believe it. The car was mobbed by a huge crowd that mobbed it, and arms were coming in the window and stuff, and everybody was yelling, "What do you want to buy? You want acid? You want cocaine? You want weed? You want this? You want that?" The entire parking lot was full of, well, basically hippies that looked just like us, but they were all selling drugs. They were all selling drugs, the entire parking lot. And so we wound up finding an older guy that we knew that moved there, and he kind of looked like, the Maharishi. He's wearing a big robe, and he's got this huge pipe in his living room. We're all sitting around, and it's got like 8 hoses coming out of it and stuff like that. And then we wind up in some like, I don't know, it was kind of a hostel. And all the doors were opening and closing, and people were getting high and running in and out. It was just like, oh my God. We found paradise.
Right.
Heaven on earth.
Right.
Those
were, you know what, I as you know, I'm not for substance abuse in any way, but I clearly imbibed in those days, I consumed mass quantities of several potions, and I can tell you, when it was still young, those things encourage creativity. I'm a songwriter. When I would engage in a chemical aid, it did open my mind. Well, but here's the problem. It's like doing a dance with the devil, because what it gives, it takes back tenfold if you're not very careful. And you know my story, Royce. I took one of those substances way too long, and I had to pay the price for it, you know. But what a wonderful time until that happened. You know, I have no regrets in my life. I've made my mistakes, and I've had a wonderful life. You know, because I grew up in this time period. What a wonderful time to be alive.
I wasn't shy about doing everything everybody else was doing. And so we're at the Laguna Beach Taco Bell, and somebody wants to know if I want to buy something. And I go, well, yeah, okay. I mean, they sell for $5 a piece in Henderson, Nevada. I'm getting them for like 50 cents a piece. Yeah, I think I'll do that. So I walked down from the behind that Taco Bell, this long set of steep wooden steps down to the beach. Me and the guy do the transaction. And as I start walking back up the steps, there's a guy that looked like, an NFL linebacker at the top of his steps in an impeccable suit and tie, dark glasses on, taking up the whole top stairway, staring at me come up the stairs. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in trouble now. I didn't know whether to turn around and run back down the stairs or what. I finally just acted, as nonchalant as I possibly could. Without anybody knowing what was just like going on inside. And I got up to this top step, and we were staring at each other, and he stepped aside, and I walked by, and that was it.
It's kind of naive, I guess, looking back, but there's a romantic notion to it, as opposed to when the whole thing with drugs became just purely recreational, because we're talking about a period where it was really about people seeking enlightenment and trying to tap into that latent 90% of the brain to access, higher thinking and greater creativity. So, I mean, that's a bigger piece of it that you can kind of go, yeah, I get it. Had I been in that time.
Right.
And yet, Bruce, there was a romantic flavor to all of it, I mean, you got to admit it. I mean, if you've gone through what Royce and I have gone through in our lives, and Dan could tell you a few tales, I'm sure. There was a magic in the air.
Yeah.
It was like a global spell for young people, And the great generation, the greatest generation before us,
Right.
feared change. We fear change, Captain.
They did fear
You know
change.
what I mean? And yet we did tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I feel like the younger generation today is doing the same thing with and that is our penance, because they're no more guilty than we were. You know, now it's, you know, I get told on my channel by younger viewers all the time, who taught grandpa to teach a computer or to use a computer, right? And usually because I've attacked whatever band they like or whatever. But there's okay, Boomer. Oh, don't start with me on okay, Boomer. Oh God, you know, don't do that, folks, because I'm telling you right now, you know, that's the N word for me. All right, I own Boomer. If you're not a Boomer, you can't say okay, Boomer. You're not in the hood. All right, so shut your mouth on okay, Boomer. I've had enough of it. All right, you know.
Yeah.
Make your own fucking mistakes and talk to me in 20 years. All right. See how the new generation after you views you.
Well, you know,
or you can learn your lesson now, folks, and think that you're not, you know, quit being the what's in Nazis. Okay.
Well, you know, what's interesting, guys, is like is like the greatest generation, the ones that saved us from tyranny and, you know, World War II.
Right.
Laid their lives on the line. He had total respect. My dad was in the Screaming Eagles, 101st Airborne, you know, parachuting behind German lines and stuff like that. It's the same airborne that 101st Screaming Eagles that Jimi Hendrix was in. Man, we're really connected.
Well,
now.
Royce, I do mild studies, not as much as Rachel on Rachel's Ghost. She's a historian. She's a historian monster, but I have studied World War II quite a bit. I'm aware of the events. I'm quite schooled in it, and you know, they were the greatest generation.
You have to give it. But you know what I was going to say though is they drank a lot, and I don't know.
Yeah, they did.
I don't know if it was from being in the war or what. Because when I was living in Henderson, Nevada, just a few miles from Las Vegas, we'd come down, you know, Boulder Highway and hit Lake Mead Drive. Keep going straight. You go to Boulder City and Hoover Dam. Go left, you can go out to Lake Mead or stop at my subdivision where I live. Anyway, so we'd hit that corner, and there would be the Ranch House Bar. My father was a member of a club that held their meetings at the Ranch House Bar, and he also worked for a liquor distributing company, so he was pretty popular. He probably never had to pay for a beer. Anyway, we'd pull up to that intersection to make our left to go home, and in front of the bar, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, was trucks with camper shells. Now remember, Vegas was a 24-hour city. The mothers, the wives were all out working as change girls and stuff, because that's where all the tips were. The late shift from midnight to 8 in the morning. All the guys from LA were in there, been drinking all night, just, you know, like they'd come in and they go, Pauline, they'd call my mother's name when they got there from LA looking for her. They'd say, what machine should I play? And she'd be keeping an eye all night, what's been hitting and what hasn't hit in days. And she'd go, why don't you try this one? You know, some dollar machine. The guy would go over there and hit, you know, $500 after a couple of pulls and give her $50 in silver dollars or $20 in silver dollars. And she was really lucky picking machines for people. But see, the wives and mothers were all working those night shifts because that's what the tips were. You don't make any money in a casino working the morning shift or the afternoon shift.
Right.
People are in there at night getting drinks and partying, you know?
Yeah.
And so you'd pull up. So the husbands are left home alone with 2 or 3 kids. Well, what do you see at the bars with the lights shining on the cars? You see a camper shell on the back of the truck and 3 little heads sticking up, waiting for dad to come out of the bar. Probably been there for several hours.
I know. I was in the same camper shell, only it was a Studebaker. My dad would leave me and my brother, go do his drinking. But you know what, Royce, a lot of people don't, the divorce was starting to, for the first time, go on the rise. Drinking, spousal abuse, there were caffeine, cigarettes, and doctors recommending Camels as your favorite on the Lucy show. All right. Now, think about it. All of these people, even if they didn't even serve over in Europe or in the Pacific, they were online for it. So the males, all right. And when they were over there getting ready, every stimulant, every drop of alcohol, because you know what? Their job was to kill freaking people. The first German you see, take them out. The first Jap you see, take them out. And then they came back to civilization. Now, also what was happening in World War II, women went into the workforce and showed that they could build monstrous tanks, airplanes, secret jet fighters, and everything else. And they went back to being, yes, dear. All right.
They were asked to quit their job so the soldiers could go, back to work.
All right. So we're good at understanding the problems of returning Vietnam vets.
Right.
But that whole generation, their price was the second half of their life was cursed. Right. And we forget that. We forget that.
It was tough. I remember traveling around all over the country, my father looking for a job, and he had a big family, and sometimes we'd be staying at one of his brothers or sisters' houses with all their kids, and there'd be like 5 or 6 kids and 4 adults in some little place, And
hey, Royce, did you ever get a belt taken to you?
Oh, you know what? Not only did you get a belt taken to you, it didn't stop until you cried because you hadn't.
That's right.
Unless it hurt.
My mom made us go out and pick switches. She'd switch our legs, and we used to wear, at that time, it was summer, we'd wear short pants. Now we're wearing full length. It would have been accused, it would be seen as elder abuse. But or not elder abuse, but child abuse, right?
Abuse. Absolutely.
Okay. And my dad took a little thing, because he was a country western singer, so he had those white diamond thin belts, about a 1/4 inch thick. And he'd take that to me, but never too hard, but he'd leave marks. And guess what? We were better for it. Sissy ass, pains in the asses. Good Lord.
The funny thing was, my mother would wear about a 3 or 4 inch wide plastic belt. And it was like, it was all you could do to keep from laughing when you were getting hit with it. But
but we learned, Royce, did we learn? Did we learn?
Not from that belt, but we learned a little bit from the other.
I learned. I learned.
No, I hear you. But
there's nothing wrong with just a little bit of corporal punishment. I can count on one hand how many times I've spanked my youngest daughter. And this goes for my other kids, right? But there were 5 times or 4, and I reserve that right.
Too.
Yeah. And no policeman and no school teacher or school board is going to take that right away from me. So fuck you people too.
I know. I still see the look on my father's face. I swear to you, he looked like he was killing Germans. He was still in the army when he was swinging.
Yeah, I believe it.
And but the terrible thing is, I have to admit that we were to blame, because I don't know how many warnings he would yell out. He's working like a night shift or something at the time, and he's trying to sleep, so he go to work. And me and my little brother, and I think most of you guys have met him, Richie. He's got that show, The Jesus.
Oh, I love Richie. Yeah. I love Richie.
And
what a guy.
My brother would be making so much noise, and we get so many warnings, and it all just went right over our heads until we got whipped. And we'd go to bed, and we were little kids, and like I said, he wouldn't stop until you were crying. So we'd go to bed, and he'd be in his bed, and I'd be in my bed, and we'd look at each other, and we'd look so funny, our faces crying, that we'd immediately start laughing. And it probably was an hour later we weren't getting whipped again.
It sounds like me and my brother David.
Went right back to making unbearable amounts of noise.
No, you had to let the parents know it was hurting. Yeah, no, I don't want this, But the older you got, you bore up under it better. You still didn't want the whooping. But damn it, some of my core values were carved by some belts and switches. All right.
Oh, yeah.
And core values are missing today, folks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In the music scene, too,
Well,
so
I mean, it got to the point where kids were threatening to turn their parents in if they spanked them, and things like that.
Oh, they do it now. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Do you know? Listen? I homeschooled my daughter. She's going to university. Oh God, I have got such an empty nest feeling about myself. And her
Oh, yeah.
mom's even going through it worse. She's 24, so she stayed with us. She could only go to community college. So she did that. She got all these things, top grades, straight A's, 4.0, and she's going. But you know what? When we did all of those kinds of things, we did it based on what we learned, right? How we raised our kids, what we, so each generation has something to teach. And I think it's, I've never seen, even our generation, Royce, didn't hold such contempt that I see a lot of millennials holding for the baby boomers.
No, I agree. And I don't have any ill feelings towards my parents. I love my parents.
Me neither.
I really don't, but you're right about that. I've felt that from some kids,
Well, here's the deal. My dad was an abusive husband. He beat my mom. She left him. All right. Brilliant man. All right. But he's part of my DNA. All right. He's part, but his half of my DNA precluded me to be the Michael that I am, along with my mom's, right? But here's the deal. There was a time he never hurt us as kids.
Right.
He had this problem. I mean, it took 5 cops to take him in one time after he broke my mom's ribs, right? So
Wow.
I'm not saying the greatest generation was the greatest generation all the time. My dad is a perfect example, and I still love him to this day. I had to go through this whole forgiveness thing in my head, and I went to my mom and said, Mom, I've got to forgive Dad. And she was totally understanding. I had the best mom on the planet. No, you guys, no, Bruce, no, I did. All right. This woman raised 4 boys and a girl all on her own, starting off with welfare, and became the co-director of the juvenile hall in the state of California, Sonoma County. All right. Yeah. And she was a monster human being, not just a monster woman. Right. And she was right there on the lines when women got their rights, but she was also right there on the lines with the National Organization of Women. And she called the bullshit and the secret funding that was behind that and the manipulation of the modern woman starting in the late 70s. All right. And my mom was smart enough to figure that bullshit out. Right. So I get my right leanings from my parents. They're kind of, conservative folks. Yeah. But my left leanings are, no, it can't be just that simple. Sometimes people need a helping hand. But I don't want it to be given by programs that don't do the job, first of all, and just become an added on every year. Congress just gives them their allotment and they produce nothing. All right. So I'm all for helping people get off the streets, helping people come over. Matter of fact, anything to do with recovery, I am willing to pay smart money in taxes for, but not just to give them money or to offer money to a crowd that thinks it's okay to burn down post office. And when they do break in, oh, well, they're just poor, Michael. And the riot started. Yeah, but what are they getting? They're hijacking 5 Apple computers, Reeboks, and Nike tennis shoes by the truckload. They're criminals.
I never understood that at all.
They're not poor. They're not one of the poor masses that got mad at Donald Trump. All right? They're criminals. Right. Call an ace an ace. And unless you can face up to your generation's sins, you're doomed to repeat them, folks. All right, we had to. Right. I had to. Oh, Royce had to. But Bruce, for his generation, he's only one generation behind us. Yeah. All right, his generation still had some common sense. They were still being. I'll bet you a lot of our tales that Royce and I just shared. Bruce, if you didn't share all those, I'll bet you there was some. Oh, yeah. Because that stuff didn't go away overnight, right?
No. And, single mother in the 70s struggling and she suffered domestic abuse too. And I saw it firsthand as well and all of those things. And And, to tie it into like what we're talking about with the compassion of the Greenwich Village scene and the socially conscious, there's a thing of like, yes, a genuine compassion and a desire to help versus rewarding entitlement. So I'm kind of with you guys in the sense of like, there is an approach to do this, but not to reward this sort of sense of like, give me, because we all have, if you at root, unless you were genuinely, live this sort of perfectly entitled and sequestered and idealized life, we all have a sob story of some kind. We've all suffered, we've all hurt, but the whole thing of like me expecting the world to reward that just, in and of itself,
right,
versus, looking at people who are hurting and wanting to really kind of help, on better situations for the long term, not just looking at a short term fix, but the responsibility of really looking at and engaging in ideas that are going to work long term. That takes much more work than just giving the money is easy in a lot of cases. That's the easy solution. It's the responsibility that each of us should genuinely spring from a sense of well-being and brotherhood towards one another. And if that harkens back to a little bit of the hippie ideology, it doesn't mean that was all wrong either, because talking about what you guys were saying, a lot of people want to make fun of that era and boomer this and boomer that. That doesn't mean that the ideas in and of themselves were wrong. They may not have been executed perfectly as the hippie generation illustrated, but at root, the what gave birth to it was right. It was a right instinct.
Well, perfectly said, Bruce. So wonderfully said. And guess what, folks?
Absolutely.
We had our sins. How about the slogan? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Rock and roll, on my channel, I talk about what degradation it's sunk to, right, these days. But sex, free sex, I was all for that, folks. Had some of my best times in the day, right? I wanted to get laid. Yeah, that's why I was all for.
So did everyone who formed a band.
Yeah, that's why I was all for free love. And guess what? I was all for communes because artists and musicians hung out at them and the one thing that rose from the village was socialism, which it doesn't work, folks. Sorry, it doesn't work. It's the same side of the coin to communism. All right. If you think it's going to work, if you think one day we're going to get back to the garden, see, I love that song and I love the possibilities. But if we ever get to that point, we're talking hundreds of years of evolution beyond where we are. All right. So let's try to stay in the moment. Let's try and stay in the moment, because our adversities, our weaknesses are our universities. Notice I didn't use God there because I didn't want to offend anybody. But if it's not God that will teach you, then it's the goddamned world that will teach you. And if you're open to owning your mistakes, the world is your fucking oyster, people. All right? The best things in my life came from my worst freaking mistakes. But I had to look at myself in the mirror. And so few people are willing to do that today. Yeah, and that's why I love talking to the two of you. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to people unless I knew instinctively. These are people who look at themselves in the mirror. They know their own mistakes. They know they're full of shit. All of us sit on a toilet and watch YouTube, right? We all sit on a toilet and watch YouTube. That's where I usually watch Rachel. Sorry, Rachel. I haven't been able to get over to her channel lately because of my schedule.
Yeah, I feel guilty too because I've been leaving early for work. She starts at 6. I'm busy putting things in and out of my truck. Like tomorrow we've got to paint something because the cutoff for billing's on Tuesday. So I got to get that done. And there's a lot of prep to do. The prep's the whole thing on the painting. You spend 4 hours prepping and an hour and a half spraying and cleaning your machine, right? And so we built these balconies, and I got to get them sprayed tomorrow. Put my bill in tomorrow night. Then it's a 5 or 6 day turnaround. But if I miss that, it's an entire another week.
Yeah.
So
Royce, I have so much respect for you to run this show and the channel as you do, and still at your age. And guess what? We're both at the same age. I came out of retirement, brother. Now I'm working as often as you are and putting in the same kind of hours only for my channel.
For your
But
channel,
yeah, because I all of a sudden it hit me one day. I go, what the fuck am I doing here?
right,
Am I just slowly fading away?
right.
I talk about Rachel's ghost. I was Michael's ghost, and I thought, no, I got to create. So I put all my creative energy into the channel. You do the same thing, and you're working a full-time job, brother.
Oh, well,
My
and,
mad respect.
I have a
Mad
wife who'd probably
respect.
rather be doing something else, than sitting out on the couch by herself while I'm doing this. So
Right.
it
Well,
is.
tell
does-
Betty we appreciate her patience.
Okay. But you know what? I will say this on her behalf. She comes up with so many ideas. I mean, we drove somewhere earlier today, and she goes, "Well, why don't you do a show on this?" We happened to be listening to a syndicated radio show that was covering a certain like topic, and so we're driving, for an hour and a half, and I'm taking all these notes, and I go, "That's a great idea." But she gives me so many show ideas, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're really good.
And you know what, Royce? When I'm doing this, my studio is 1/3 of my bedroom. This is
Okay.
where I'm at. Okay? I don't have a dedicated room. All right. I sleep in this room.
Right.
But like your wife, my wife is sitting out waiting for me patiently. And you
Right.
know what? I get some of my best ideas. I call her Kiki D. Her name's Kimberly, but I call her Kiki D because it's Kimberly Deanne. And I just love that name.
Elton John and Kiki D.
Yeah. So it's just a nickname, but she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. And you know what, Royce, you're even a business partner with your wife. I know that. And guess what? There's the secret of a healthy relationship right there. Hook yourself up with somebody. Do not be unevenly yoked, children. Right?
Yeah.
Hook yourself. Don't be the strong one, and don't be the needy. And when you're looking for that special someone, because they'll look you in the eye and say, "You're so full of shit, Michael." And I love her for it. I love her for it. I need that sometimes.
Like that, things like that, and much worse, actually.
Yes, Dan. Yes, Dan. Yeah, and Dan made a similar comment on my channel, and because my latest video kind of touched some of this stuff, but most of the people that commented on that part of the video said that, yeah, all of them are actually, I haven't heard of a single comment yet saying, no, that's not true. They all said, oh, I was a whole lot more liberal when I was a teenager.
Yeah, especially coming from our generation.
Right.
I mean, everything we did would be considered liberal.
Right. I mean, when I was a teenager, I did believe in that we could change the world in our generation.
Right.
That's the hope and ignorance of a young person. But that's not a bad launch pad to start from.
Well,
be a little foolish.
I think every generation deserves at one point to have that as an ideal to aim for.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's why I really agreed with your comment about you're, liberal in some areas and conservative in other. That's what I've been my whole life. I tend to be, because of business and paying taxes and stuff, I tended to be more conservative. Once I entered the real workforce, but I could never escape my past. I can never escape my past.
Yeah. Right. And I'm an artist too, Royce. And so are you, by the way. And so are you, Bruce. YouTube is your art, whether you can embrace it like that or not, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm an artist in several areas. I'm not going to get into that, but it's the artist in me that embraces the left side, but at the same time, I'm not for state sponsorship of art.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I won't vote for that.
No.
All right. I'm a busker. I get paid for what I do.
Right.
And if it's good enough, I make some money. If not, I don't.
That's life.
Right.
That's
I don't need you. I don't need your tax money, Royce, to sponsor me as an artist. No, thank you. I don't want it. And I'm not willing to give it to other people either.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if you want to start a program to teach music in the schools again, all right, I'll pay taxes on that. That's
Right.
pretty liberal. That's
Yeah,
pretty
they've
liberal.
done away with most of the music lessons, haven't they?
Yeah. Oh no, it
Yeah.
went by way of the dinosaur, along with parental rights. They think it's now the state's job to raise your children, and they can go to hell for that. All right. So, and I'm not talking about the left all the time. I think it's the left's wishful thinking that gets us into problems, and it's the right's kind of logical thinking that fixes us. And that's why, for the most part, we go, not every time, but we'll go into a whole 12-year period of one party as president. But most of the time, we switch and back and forth. And no, Roger Waters, our presidents aren't fascists. They can't be. You see, we vote them out when we don't like them.
Right.
Try that next time you're talking in an interview. Dumb shit.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but Roger Waters,
Yeah.
while you were perfecting your art and creating a brand new universe, and while you were contemplating your navel, the rest of us lived a life. We learned some lessons, and we can tell you fuck you when you're full of it. And I do respect you as a genius composer.
Yeah.
Amen.
Very
All right.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah. But see, all these questions, Royce, they're not easy. They're not easy. And I think it's foolish to hate somebody because you don't like their politics. I don't hate Roger Waters. All right. I'm a fan, but I don't have to buy into the whole Roger Waters enchilada because I'm a fan.
Right.
All right. And your fans who were there for your beginning, Roger, that you seem to not care about anymore, and raise ticket prices, alienating original 60 people and us old and infirm people on Social Security. Shame on you. Shame on you.
That's not right. Where's my senior?
But, it's just I'm saying every generation, but this whole thing that came out of these wonderful little pockets of creativity came from people questioning their beliefs, whether they were right or wrong. They questioned what they were raised with, and they were willing to change the world.
Yeah.
Right. I really felt that as a young person, and
me too.
In my mid-teens, later teens, especially, and it was just really different, really a different period of time,
And it was, and if you weren't there, I'm sure, if we could go back in time, somebody from the French Revolution who, had, some sort of connection to Napoleon, he'd tell us the same thing. You weren't there.
Absolutely. And there's probably a lot of things we missed that subsequent generations were in the middle of,
Oh, yeah. And guess what? Like I said, we made our mistakes. But here's the deal. You're never going to hear it from me that we had it all right or wrong. And the ones of us who were willing to question ourselves, we came out different than perhaps some of the artists and some of the, like, for example, I'm a major John Lennon fan, right?
Yeah.
I think Imagine, brilliant lyrics.
Oh, yeah.
But what a load of wishful thinking. I think if John had lived later, because he was famous for changing his mind, in, out, revolution, all of that. I'm wondering, you got to see, right around the time he died, Yoko was buying up land all over North Carolina and the East Coast and everything. They were becoming a corporation. I'm wondering if John would have done Imagine, number nine, with totally different lyrics. See, that's why I love the man.
He actually was criticized for those lyrics. They were kind of
they're ignorant.
Wasn't the song almost banned, from some radio stations and stuff?
Yeah, which I wasn't for. I just didn't agree with the lyrics. Right. They're beautifully put together. It's not the structure of sentences or anything, but people who think that we're ever going to get to the point in the next 200 or 300 years where there's going to be no possessions. All right. I lived with people in commune houses. pretty soon it's the person who's collecting everybody's portion to pay the rent and their grocery bills to go get the food. All of a sudden, he or she has a higher thing, and then they start realizing they can take a portion of this, invest it there, and pretty soon they're Putin. Okay? Right. Socialism and communism don't work because we're human, folks. And
right,
you can't have my stuff. You just can't have my stuff. I worked for it. You know, if I'm in a field next spot, you know, in the Soviet Union, and I scythe 3,000 pounds of wheat, and the guy next to me scythes 50 pounds of wheat, and we both take home the same pen. No,
you know, Michael,
you can't have that.
Right, alcoholism was so rampant in Russia.
Oh yeah,
there was no incentive to do more, to be better, to, you know. There was just no incentive. Everybody got paid.
Well, it kept you dumbed down and it kept your mouth shut so you didn't wind up in Siberia. All right.
Right.
I mean, everybody says, you know, in World War II, they called Stalin Uncle Joe. He was our ally. A lot of Americans really liked it. There was a Communist Party very active in America at the time. It wasn't seeing the black eye that it later seemed to get, right? Well, and guess what? They said, well, he's Uncle Joe. And he's a communism, but that Hitler is a fascist. All right. Well, the second they got into Berlin, Stalin was a fucking fascist.
Right.
So don't tell me fascism starts on the right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anytime you have a great man whose will is over the common people, that's a fascist. And no way to get him out. All right. Ultimate power. So clarify your thoughts on the whole subject. I get tired of it, Royce. I didn't mean to go down this road, but
all of this stuff does become very exhausting. And you know, the thing is too, is that us being as long as we are kind of stuck in the human domain and subject to those vulnerabilities, this will always be an irreconcilable subject, right? So what fascinates me is like 100 years from now, to tie it back to like the art we're talking about, is like, which decade of all this art and this, you know, the music is going to endure the most? Because what set of ideas is going to continue to have the most impact? I'm fascinated kind of forward projecting and thinking about that, you know, because obviously with this 60s period we're talking about, it was such fertile artistic ground. The stuff we're getting now, will it have the same resonance? You know, I find a lot of it quite puerile myself and stuff like that, but that's all maybe a generational thing. But you know, we'll never.
Young folks aren't even listening to what they listened to 6 months ago, Bruce.
Right.
And they're hardly listening to what they're listening to now.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody is willing to do research and to learn and to appreciate. See, we saw our music as art. We often, you know, many of us put album covers on our walls, just like Bruce has got right now, only pinned up. It was art. It was, oh, what a wonderful, and that is a wonderful album. Masterpiece right there. All right. And you and I still got to do our thing, Bruce. I haven't forgotten. You know the changes with the channel lately, but, you know, that's what's missing in today's music. You know, what those coffee houses burnt out was fire from a fucking volcano, people. All right. It gave nourishment to those who were around it. And we got masterpieces in our generation. All right. Yep. I know every time I do a video on this, I get people going, yeah, well, if you know where to look, there's still good music. And they're absolutely right. For sure. And I've given a few bands that I'm hot on, and I'm going to do even more on them on my Patreon coming up. But I really, because they don't get the views, but I want to feature some of these bands. There are some great bands, young rock bands that are every bit as good as some of Alice Cooper. I don't know, Deep Purple. I'm not hearing anything that has the virtuosos, because you know what, Eddie Van Halen, he's one of my top 10 guitarists, but I'm not a shredder kind of guy. Yeah. All right, it doesn't speak to me. It takes the blues out of it. Eddie Van Halen's amazing. I like both versions of the Van Halen group, but I'm not a major fan of that style of guitar, because
That's really well put. I mean, it was not.
Yeah.
It was not melodic. It didn't really go with the.
Well, it's not just the melodic. So many of them are just playing fucking scale. You know, when I took Robin Ford courses. I got that Australia chap's how to shred within 60 days. I just wanted to know how he did it and everything. And as soon as I started looking into it, and I got a couple little tapping things going, I didn't like it. It didn't breathe. And yet, very much like shredding is Richie Blackmore back in the day. Yeah. All right. Oh, because he was doing tapping shit and stuff before Van Halen. And guess what? You know, I'm so tempted to bring him up into my top 3. Richie Blackmore. All right. So these are the giants that walked amongst us.
Well, Zeppelin, Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Richie Blackmore were kind of the, or Deep Purple were kind of the at the top.
They called them the unholy trinity.
That's right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And I don't think now out of those 3 bands, I think Black Sabbath was the lesser. All right. Now, first of all, Black Sabbath's one of my favorite bands in all time. Tony Iommi's a riff master. I love the whole doom and gloom, and I love the fact that they write not about Satan. They write about him, but he's the bad guy in their songs. All right. And Geezer Butler's wonderful. But now when you move up to Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, you know, talk about a shade of difference as far as musicianship. Ian Pace versus Bonham, you got to give it to Bonham. Yeah. Bass player, Glover can't do what's his name? Richie Blackmore would give Jimmy Page a run for his money any night of the year. He's that good. All right. And then singers. All right. I like Robert Plant, but I could see the more popish coming from Ian is really good. But then their secret weapon. And yes, he can combat even John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin's secret weapon. And that is, good Lord, the Almighty, John Lord. He could do anything on the keyboards that Richie Blackmore did. And when they did it, and together them creating almost Bach and almost 18th century modes into the music, they grew to near Led Zeppelin status. They were the shadow hovering over Led Zeppelin, in my opinion, during the 70s. They were the monster.
I don't know. I probably don't agree with that, but I left this up for a reason. Marcus Thompson. It's kind of the way I always felt about that song too. I didn't feel like he was trying to espouse communism or anything else. He just says the whole goal is to just imagine the things he's talking about. The sentiments are great. Why wouldn't people imagine peace? And that's kind of how I felt. I didn't really feel like it was a political statement at all.
And John Lennon was smart enough to know that, he was savvy enough to know that it was more of an idealized statement. He was really just setting out to write the anthem and get that idea out there. I don't know if he fully believed that
John Lennon. Yeah.
And if you listen to me, Marcus, what I said was the lyrics are very well written. I feel that some of them, now he says no religion. All right. I have a religious background, but I hate religion. All right. Religion has done nothing for us, but I believe in God. I'm a Christian. All right. So
organized religion. Yeah.
Right. But I don't believe any religion on earth has it now. You know how I found out the truth? I read the Bible from page to page several times. All right. Roger Waters goes and reads some communist manifesto type of thing and comes up with a new world order vision in his mind. I'm busy reading the book, in my opinion. All right. Now, even if you don't believe in God, there is so much to learn from that book, but everybody wants to go out and buy, the Ninja Warrior book on how to be a ninja to succeed in business. I got to a point when I hit 65, Royce, I swear to God, and I'm holding myself to it. No more fucking gurus. I learned my lesson. I'm a full grown man. I'm my own guru now. I am complete.
And to tie that back to John Lennon, that was John Lennon's ultimate message: is be your own hero, be your own guru.
Right. And like I said, my favorite artist of all time, singer-songwriter, would be Paul McCartney, only because he got extra time on this planet up until the day in 1980 when John Lennon was murdered by a pig shit. They were tied. I couldn't make up my mind which one. I liked John's kind of nasally voice, but I liked Paul's sweet voice, or Paul's rock and roll voice and John whispering. Or I like John's lyrics over Paul's, except for when Paul outwrote John, Eleanor Rigby, although Lennon states he wrote 80% of the words on that. Okay, that's one of two songs that Paul and John disagree with. Yeah. All right. But Paul, on other songs, they didn't disagree with. Blackbird. I mean, that's every bit as genius writing lyrics as anything John Lennon wrote. But then again, John Lennon would turn around. They said Paul was the melody man, right? And John Lennon would turn around, oh, my lover for the, based on a Japanese tonality scale. Oh, and stripped his music bare. That's my favorite John Lennon album, by the way. Plastic Ono Band. Him, Ringo, and Klaus Vormann. Phil Spector in the background, plotting murder, and Yoko knitting or whatever she did on a bed. All right. That's my favorite John Lennon album. Far better than Imagine, which is a classic album and probably my number 2 by John Lennon. But while he was alive, he gave, matter of fact, he was out writing Paul at the beginning. Paul had, some stutters along the way, and I mean, his first 2 albums were brilliant, but then he started thinking, well, everybody thinks I'm a shithead. And then subsequent albums, his first album, first of all, with Wings, was, even though it was supposed to be more like a, Dylan in the country kind of recording, haphazard. Yeah. And if you listen to it like that, it's a great album. But then there's some weaknesses I hear on Railroad Speedway. But he finally got it together, and he was writing back on John Lennon's level with Band on the Run. They were so close. I can't choose between the two if you just choose the time up till 1980.
Yeah, it crystallizes for Paul around 73. And then that 73 to 76 run that peaks with that Wing Over America tour, I mean, it was almost like a second renaissance for him in terms of he was playing bass and singing live as good as he ever had as well.
Ever. Oh, God, have you watched? I was there for some of that footage for Rock Show was actually from the San Francisco show. So, but I've never been, I can't tell because the arena, the way it's all done, they're similar. But I'll tell you right now, I was there that night. No fucking mistakes. And he was singing right on key. It was like the fucking, sorry, I slipped into Mr. F word tonight, but we got on to some personal stuff. But anyway, Bruce, you're so right. Matter of fact, that album, Wings Over America, rates very high. It's underneath the Allman Brothers live, but it's very close to it.
Without a doubt, one of the greatest live 70s albums of all time.
And a triple fucking album, too.
And
Band on the Run. Band on the Run.
Paul, too. Had Paul not done anything beyond 1970, the guy's legend would rest assured, because nobody wrote a batch of songs as good as he did in the 60s. I mean, you could say Lennon, comparable only. Yeah. But had he not done anything else, the fact that he still did a lot of, especially looking back at it retrospectively, a lot of that 70s stuff was great. Despite what the critics were giving him shit for at the time, a lot of that stuff holds up. And there's variety in it. And I like that you have albums from Paul that are different. Ram is different from McCartney. Wildlife, wildly different. And now when you look at the totality of his catalog, it's brilliant that he has, you just see his musicality in full. It's so wide-reaching, much more than people ever give him credit for.
And his use of chords got quite intricate in the 90s and have continued to this very day. He's using advanced chording in his music now, and his melodies are now based on almost jazz ideas on some of his new stuff.
And he actually improved as a lyricist, like from Flaming Pie onward.
Yeah.
He actually, you know, because everything was sort of impersonal in the 70s. It was like snapshots and like, you know, very distant in terms of the what he's writing about. It becomes much more personal from Flaming Pie onward. He's writing much more about himself. And
God, that album has so much soul. Oh,
lyrics went up a notch. And to think that this guy who was already a genius in the 60s has continued to make the effort to improve, I also find very inspiring.
I agree.
Well, listen, guys. I'm not going to be able to go to bed until I edit this video and give it a starting point.
Poor man.
So,
hey, Royce, I'm sorry things got. Yeah, but it's good to see you back on air. You know,
thank you.
It wasn't a total trash thing. I had a great time just talking with you. If nobody else heard it,
we didn't know the difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
once it went live, I think it actually went up a notch too.
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
Let's definitely get it back together next week, and we'll try to go live next week. So anyway, I want to thank everybody that I would have never dreamed I wasn't live because the people were still in the chat and chatting it up. Every once in a while, Manny would say, well, I'm going to leave. Well, I'm going to leave. And I'm like, why is Manny leaving? Are we getting off subject or what? Well, he was leaving because he couldn't see or hear us. You know?
Oh, boy.
He actually stayed. But anyway, guys, thank you. And I want to thank everybody in the chat for putting up with what happened tonight. You are so appreciated. And we swear this will never happen again. All right. So thank you very much.
Today was jazz, folks. It was jazz.
And that's what's going on in the Royce's world. Thank you once again. Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.